Well, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today one of our newest Rotarians, and that is Colonel Rusty Ballard. And to avoid giving away any top secret or confidential military information for our speaker today, I'm just going to ask Rusty to come up and join us and give out all his top secret info.
I got to come up with some top secret information. What an intro, thank you. Leah that talked about that, the honor flight. If nobody has done that before, that is one of the coolest things we have going. If you're a veteran and you want to go do that, it's really neat. I took over the wing of the 182nd Airlift Wing back in June. And one of the things they do, I guess, as the wing commander, is I'm the first person when they get off the plane, and I get to give them a coin, an honor flight coin. You shake their hand. I tell you, it's really neat to obviously say thank you to them, but what almost brings me to a tear of mine every time is seeing the person pushing the wheelchair or getting off the plane with them, because that's their child, it's their brother, it's their nephew. So it means everything to them to give them that coin. And just seeing their reaction really warms your heart for the service they've given our country and the day that we've been able to provide. So if you ever get a chance, do it. It's a party. There's bands, there's music. It's just a huge, wild event. It's a great time. So my name is Rusty Ballard, and I'm learning that to break in the new members, you give them the pin the first time, get a name tag, and they say, okay, you're the guest speaker next time. Glad you didn't disclose that a couple weeks ago when we got that. So, welcome. So I'm the wing commander of the 182nd Airlift Wing, and we are the Air National Guard. And one of the questions I got earlier, and it's one of the questions you get all the time, is what is the difference between the Air National Guard and the United States Air Force? I don't know. Tell me. It's not easy. So you have the Department of Defense, you have all the services that fall underneath that, and then you have the United States Air Force, and that's where we're at. And then Congress throws out some other money that's earmarked for the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserves. That's the earmark for them to take care of that. Then it comes down to just funding, right? So trying to get too in the weeds, but basically we're funded to do everything that the Air Force does, and we're funded by the active duty. But we also, when we're not at war, we're funded by the governor. And so anytime we do that, we're called Title 32 or state active duty, and we can support any other mission outside of wartime function. So that's usually the first question. So let me get in the slideshow. I'm not the funniest person in the world, and I've always been told you're going to speak publicly, you better be faster and funnier. So I will try to be fast to make up for the funniness. So here we go. So I guess I can do this. Hit the big button.
Big button.
It works. All right. So the 169 Airlift Squadron. This year's our 75th anniversary. This started after World War II. And I just read this recently from a speech done for somebody in 1951. I believe, is it Jack that I met back there?
Ted.
And the one behind you is who I met Ted today, and Jack.
Yeah.
He was in the unit prior to you serving. I think it was in the 50s.
1950 December.
There you go. Okay. It's a little while ago, but.
Oh,
But no, so back after World War II, there were some local fighter pilots that went here in Western in a pub. A lot of them were working at civilian jobs just like you after the war, and they would always sit there and drink their beer and talk about how much fun they had flying in combat. It just happened to be one of the gentlemen was on a trip for Caterpillar, and he stopped in Chicago and he saw the 108 National Guard unit up there, and just saw one of the pilots out there and went to talk to him. It turns out it was a colonel in charge of the unit at the time, and said, hey, you got a bunch of pilots down at Peoria. There's a surplus of airplanes. Is there any chance that we can start an Air National Guard unit down there? He goes, no, absolutely not. Well, so this guy, this young man at the time, I think he was 25 years old, went to his congressional delegates, and he kept working it. They did it. And he came down and said, okay, here is $225,000, and you can bring on 250 people, and we'll give you these 8 airplanes. So there are P-51s at World War II, and that's how it started 75 years ago, just by that tenacity to keep doing what he did, to fly. So next slide here. Just talk where we started. Ever since they started 75 years ago, the Peoria Air National Guard has been involved in every military campaign since that time in some capacity. We've gone there, or we've supported home station. We've been part of the Air Combat Command, as we had fighter aircraft for so many years. And then we transitioned to the C-130 that falls under the Air Mobility Command back in the 1990s. So we're going on 30 years flying the C-130 that you see flying around Peoria. Up to the top right there, you can see the different aircraft that we have transitioned through over the different years as technologies increased. As capabilities have gotten stronger, we transitioned from a fighter to a mobility airframe. And for us, what that means is it keeps us alive a little bit longer. When you're the fighter airframes, there's so many adjustments to technology that it's so easy for a base to lose their funding and lose that mission set. So what they did approximately 30 years ago is let's go mobility. You're never not going to have the logistics need. And so that's why we went to the C-130s. We're continuing up that fight every day to keep the base alive. So here's our mission statement. So it basically says that we work for the president in a wartime scenario. We work for the governor to support him in anything he wants to do. And then for the adjutant in general. So there's a 2-star general in charge of the Illinois National Guard. And he's the military liaison that works directly for the governor. So, and what we do is C-130 air land and air drop. Joint terminal air control and support. What does that mean? It means we embed folks from the Air National Guard in Peoria. And I met another gentleman has a grandson that's in the unit. Where's he at? Grandson, he may have stepped out already. He's gone. Anyway, he's talked to me earlier. He had a grandson that was that does that. We embed them with the Army, and what they do is whenever that brigade commander needs a bomb dropped for him, then they talk to that low-flying aircraft and they drop the bomb. So that's essentially what that is. Command and control communication. We have people go out, set up networks wherever we're going in the remote area, and then all the logistics, civil engineering, security support, and so forth, just to operate a base. If you look at a big picture, what is a wing? A wing is a small town. We have every capability that you would need in a small town to operate. And I'm the mayor, essentially. So in the Air National Guard, there are 110,000 people in the Air National Guard. There's 90 wing commanders. So I'm one of those 90 people that's over a wing in the Air Force. And that's how the Air Force is structured. So I keep saying next slide, so I'm not used to this. So here's the command staff. So that's me up there in the middle with that cheesy smile, the wing commander. The female to the left, she's the vice wing commander. I pulled her off back to duty because she had just a wealth of experience and so many things that I needed to get after. Conversions, just to keep the base alive and all kinds of things. And then my command chief is there to the right. So I use him as my advisor for my enlisted force. So if you're not familiar with the military, it's broken up between officers and enlisted. And a very generic way to say that is the officer, and that's what I am as an officer. It's kind of like the white collar job, if you will. And the enlisted is more the blue collar. And that couldn't be more wrong. The amount of enlisted people that I have PhDs and are my subject matter experts is off the charts. Just because I'm the commander, yes, I can get in trouble for it, but I cannot take the credit for anything. And I spent 11 years in the Army, and I dug my hole and I did all the things you have to do. And I had a specific job, but I mainly did infantry work. But when I came to the Air Force, it's structured different than the other services. It's you make the decisions, all the smart people advise you. So that's what I have on base is 1,300 advisors, and then I make their decision for them so they can get out and do their job. So the Air Force is structured is we have the wing commander and that command staff, and then I have 5 group commanders essentially underneath me. And it's broken up between operations where we do the flying mission. We do maintenance to maintain those aircraft. Then we have the second to the left there. That's kind of like, he's the one that runs the show for all the extra cats and dogs, the lawyers, the doctors, they all fall under him. So he kind of manages the day-to-day operations for me. That's a great slide there. So we're the Peoria Air National Guard. Anywhere we go in the world, we have the orange stripe on the back of our tail that says Peoria on it. And we have a phenomenal reputation everywhere we go. But it's not just Peoria folks. We have people from all over the country and some from overseas that they'll come to Peoria on their own dime to come serve in the Peoria Air National Guard. That's the kind of reputation that we have. And I'm not just saying that, it's absolutely true. We have some people that work in, I just promoted a guy, he works in Europe for a civilian contractor. He pays out of pocket to come to Peoria to lose money to serve our country because he's so fond of what he's done and the people he's around. So there's a lot to be said there. Hopefully I can shed light on it a little bit here. Here's just the last 4 years. I did bring it out to 22, but the operations that we're involved in. I would think from the outside, when you see a C-130 flying, that's all they do is fly. We are embedded in so many different types of things that the air mission, and being a pilot myself, I think that's the greatest thing in the world. It's such a small piece of what we do. That's just what everybody sees. There's so many things going on out there. Wing composition, I built that a little bit. I'm authorized nearly 1,300. It's a little bit out of date, even if a month or so ago. But I have probably about 1,200 that are not in transition that are my force. If you take about 300 to 400 people on a given day it changes, that's my full-time staff. They're essentially active duty folks in the Peoria Air National Guard. They're funded by active duty, but they're in the Air National Guard. And the rest of the folks are pretty traditional folks. Superintendents at schools, people that run hotels, teachers, law enforcement officers, firefighters. In this room, how many people have served in the military? Quite a bit. How many people in this room know somebody in the Peoria National Guard? Quite a bit. So you guys, even in this small group, you guys affect and touch so many of my people on a daily basis that you're part of this. So how you influence them when these people come out of town to Peoria, it means everything to me, and ultimately it serves the country. This kind of makeup, talked about on the right side is the enlisted force. The left side is the officer force. And these numbers kind of fluctuate. It kind of tells you how people get in, whether they're officer and enlisted, and how they move up through the ranks. I started, like I said, 11 years in the Army. I was enlisted and then a Black Hawk pilot. And then I switched over when I was a captain over on the left-hand side. And then I've been coming up the ranks. It's changed, but it's a significant amount of money. So that's my budget every year. And I have a comptroller that walks me through this to make good, sound decisions so I don't get thrown in jail and get in trouble. And if I spend it prudently all the way to the end of the fiscal year, they'll give me more money, hopefully for next year. You look at that, as I mentioned earlier, when I was looking at the history of the unit, $225,000 to start up that unit back in the day. Now look at the payroll up there, $65 million. Well, that's a lot of money. What that averages out to is about $54,000 per person. So it's a modest salary. Some are a little bit above and some are a little bit below. Here's some of the local impact economically, what we do. The reason I bring this up is if anything ever comes up while we're fighting to get new planes in the Peoria National Guard, it's not just for fun. It's to stay on the map because it affects the Peoria area every drill weekend when I bring these people to town. I don't have that exactly what that economic impact is, how many hotel rooms we go to, how many restaurants we go to, the things that people buy, the beer that they buy and drink. I know there's a lot of that going on. Maybe part of that, but it's a lot of money. And I'd never hear bad things. People, you guys treat our members phenomenally. So I talked about the composition a little bit. So I'm the wing commander at the wing headquarters. I'm kind of over that full-time staff. And then I have group commanders under me that operate 13 different squadrons on the base. So the wing headquarters is the people that report basically direct to me, but I let my vice wing commander kind of handle that. So just to show you the rundown of what it is, how it is kind of a little city and how it operates. We have chaplains, we have a command post in case we go somewhere, we still talk to planes anywhere in the world. We have EO issues just like everybody else, just like sexual assault issues. So I have to have people that can handle those kind of issues. I have an inspector general that leads that. We just got done with inspection. We get that every 5 years. We had that in August. We had 90 people come throughout the country inspect what we do. And we got one of the highest grades out of the United States Air Force, not just the 90 wings in the Air National Guard, the entire Air Force. And we've been doing that as an outstanding unit here in Peoria for over the last 12 years. You all probably know a couple of the previous wing commanders, Frank Rizak, Robbie Robertson, he's in the Rotary, Dan McDonough. Those have been phenomenal people and have laid some great foundations for me to continue this mission and keep that Peoria name out throughout the world. Absolutely. How much time we got? I'll just pace myself. I'm already at 20 minutes? Oh, got 20 minutes, okay. Faster than funny. All right, so the operations group, this is all my flyers. I used to be the commander of this, so it's over all the air crews. If you think of a C-130, there's two types of C-130s. You have the H model, which is a legacy aircraft, and then you have the C-130J aircraft. The difference between those, they do the exact same mission. One is analog, it's a little bit older. The J model is the newer version, digital. I say that because on the H model, and I'm in the second aircraft in there in that picture, because we have two pilots in the front, and then we have a flight engineer that sits in between us, and he operates the systems, the bleed air, the fuel, the electronics, all that kind of stuff. And we have a navigator to help us for the airdrops when we drop them out of the back of the aircraft, and you kind of let them. So that's the air crew, and then you have operations support, make sure we do all the paperwork properly. The maintenance group, I'll show a slide here shortly. That is the #1 maintenance group in the United States Air Force, and I'm saying that a couple different times because I mean it, and that's something we need to be proud of. We have the banners to prove it and all the metrics, so forth. So in maintenance, we have various. We have flight line maintenance, and we have back shop maintenance. We take care of all the functions. It will have 82% rate, so that's a mission capable rate. I think right now fiscally we're #3, so we're still working on it to get to the #1 once again for the 12th year in a row. We are number one in the Air Force for delay rates. So we have the lowest delay rates in the United States Air Force. And what's neat about it is, just like any kind of business, it was kind of convoluted to follow all the processes. Even after 50 years operating the aircraft, there's always a better way to do it. So about 15 years ago, they put a team together for continuous process improvement and said, how do we do this more efficiently? And they did it. And we had a benchmark program that we've shared with half these units. And you can kind of see how the United States Air Force changed their maintenance programs. And that started with C-130s. It's in the fighter programs. It's in the tanker programs. And it's just going, it's not going to stop. As I said, the kit and caboodle that's kind of running the base every day. We have civil engineers. They maintain all the systems on base, and anytime I need to go to my congressional delegates to get more funding, they're the ones that do the builder programs, the CAD programs, and they put all the scenarios together so I can go advocate for it. We have logistics issues for the entire base. We have a firefighter unit, and it's mutual. So the Peoria Airport, we do all their firefighting capability right there. So if you saw on the news, I did a press conference with them about 3 weeks ago. They just got funding for $15 million to increase the capability of the tower. That affects us directly. And then kind of the give and trade, we give them firefighting services, we rent from them. We have great relationships out there. Security forces, we have other cops on base, combat comm. If we go to a remote area, they're going to set up satellite communication so we can run our operations wherever we go. We have Air Force Band, it's regionally in FEMA Region 5, and so they do everything in the 5-state area. That's a phenomenal band. I've used phenomenal quite a bit. I need to find another word. I will. Contracting for all the work we get done, and then base environmental. So we have a footprint. When we de-ice aircraft, if we have spills, that's going to go in the water. We need to mitigate if that happens to take care of the environment. Medical group, I believe I have 12 doctors that work on the base, just in a traditional sense. They're on the top, and then I have a medical detachment. And so for domestic operations capabilities, DOMOPS, in case the governor needs us to respond to a chemical, biological, or nuclear attack, I have a team that can go out there within 6 hours. So you're a part-time force. I can still get a team out in 6 hours to go do the urban search and rescue, and I can do fatality search and rescue, and we can clean up that area so we can continue to operate and take care of people. The ASOG, the gentleman I talked to earlier, his son does this. So these are the folks, they're the Army side of what we do. So whenever they go to combat, we dispatch them one off, and they'll go in bed with an Army brigade in Iraq, Afghanistan, what we did most recently. And there's 2 squadrons there. So if you're looking at airspace, my 168th Air Support Operations Squadron, that is the high level, if you would, air traffic controller. That's going to bring all the tankers and fighters in. And then I have a tactical level for the 169th, and those are my TAC Ps. And they're going to bring that A-10, F-16 and drop the bomb exactly where it needs to be do. I talked about dual mission, how we work for the governor directly when we're not doing a wartime mission. This is what we're doing, and it's a lot. So you look at your specialized skill, what you do, it takes a lot to be a load master in the back of the aircraft. It takes a lot to be a hydraulics man. I also need these people to go out and represent Illinois as we do missions such as COVID. We're doing testing sites. We stood up those. Southwest border mission. That's a political issue. We have people getting bused to Chicago with what's going on the border. We were the first ones there to support them. I'm not going to get politically wrapped in that, but just tell you we've been supporting that mission like we have many other ones. Election support, inauguration support, all kinds of different things. You know, you can read through there and see all the different things that we do. COVID-19, talked about that. That's how we led that. We had people go out there and set up those test sites, convert hotels into hospitals, and then we also did the vaccination teams. We do flood support, election support, and then we do that on the cyber side, not necessarily the security, but that was, you know, what happens on Fox News and CNN talking about the elections. Civil unrest, we had 500 people come through the Peoria Air National Guard whenever this was going on. So we brought different airframes, C-17, C-5s, KC-135s, and C-130s. We were bringing all the Air National Guard, Army National Guard folks from here to go to Minneapolis and to DC to support the federal mission. When we talk about what we do overseas, so that's where we're talking about the federal mission. So, and I'll get to the slide here, but we have over 5,000 people that have deployed from the Air National Guard since 9/11. That's pretty substantial, especially when we have nearly 1,300 people in base. That means a lot of people have deployed 5, 6, 10 times over those years. Fortunately, when we deploy generally, as an air crew member, it's only for 2 to 4 months. So when I say deploying 10 times, that is not 10 years of deployments. I know a lot of people in the Army and the Marines, they go for 6, 8, 18 months where they're deploying. That would be hard to stay in a career if you're constantly doing that. I know a lot of people have been affected in this room by family members that have deployed. The reason we don't do that as air crew, in the C-130, the missions I'd fly overseas, what we're typically doing is air land and air drop. Whenever we land somewhere to pick somebody up, it's not a cush runway. It's dirt, it's gravel, there's logs in there. And what that does when you land on a very short runway, you have to throw the aircraft into reverse. Those rocks rip off antennas, they rip off paint, they rip off brake lines. It's a complete mess. So you can only do that so many times before you got to get the aircraft back stateside so you can fix it to go back and do it again. So that's why you do the shorter rotations. And not to mention also whenever you're doing a federal mission, not only you just fly the airplane, you're also flying formation and airdrop. If we're over there for a long time, you lose proficiency in doing that. So bigger scheme, if we go to another war and you need to bring the aircraft to do a formation, large scale exercise to drop people, you need to maintain that proficiency because we do it in the weather and it's very challenging. You can't lose that proficiency. So there's the quick stats I was talking about, and that's just to the federal mission, getting those over 5,000 people that affects their lives. And then you throw on top of that all the other stuff you have to do with COVID, elections, cyber, and all this stuff. And what's beautiful about that is these are all volunteers. I've never, since I've been a commander, had to force somebody to deploy to Iraq, Afghanistan, Yukon, Africa. They're all volunteer. I don't know of any other unit in there, not sure if it does that. Hey, we will always fill the seats where we have to go there. Somebody's going to volunteer. This is pretty important. So Eastern Bloc countries, after the wall came down, they paired Air National Guard units, what's called the State Partnership for Peace. So they could basically build their own military as they got away from previous operations. And we work with them. And not only in the Air Force, like they got C-130s, we taught them how to fly the C-130s and how to operate. But in the Army, every other capacity in the military, we pair with them to do that. Why does that become important? With what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. We had people in Ukraine of a year ago from Peoria that was helping them train in other mission sets. So not only do we just do Poland, we do the neighboring countries too. So everything you're seeing in the news, somebody local from Peoria was a part of that, training those people how to defend themselves in Ukraine. So it may not have been funny, but it was relatively fast. Now, if I stand here and you don't ask me questions, I mean I didn't do a good job or you don't care. So please, let me represent my people and tell you a little bit about it.
How many aircraft do you have?
We currently have 9 aircraft on the ramp. You don't typically have more than 8. But right now we're getting so many modifications done on the older C-130 we fly. We can put 3 or 4 aircraft in at a time to get modified. And so we borrow aircraft from other units that aren't using them. So if they take 4 aircraft overseas, and we'll take their 4 and practice on them to stay proficient. So correct answer is 8, but it fluctuates.
What sort of impact did we have in Ukraine, and are there any contingency plans for us and you getting back involved in that?
We have people from Peoria right now. I have 6 people over in Yukon operating. So when I talk about the Air Support Operations Group, the people that pretty much embed with the Army and they call in the fires, we're not in Ukraine, but we're working with them. Yeah, it's happening right now. We have people over there. The logistics, we've used aircraft to move different things overseas, not necessarily funded or supported to go to Ukraine directly, but it gets to the European command, and we are, and it's not top secret. There you go. It's not top secret, but the U.S. is 100% supporting Ukraine and what they're doing, and I think we absolutely should.
Any other questions?
Looking to the future, are you looking forward to battery-powered C-130s?
That's pretty funny when you look at it. When you see all the fossil fuel getting spit out of the C-130s, we fly over Peoria every Tuesday and Wednesday night. No, but I look forward to another mission. I went to Capitol Hill last week trying to advocate for just that, so we can convert to the C-130J model because I don't know if it's necessarily a better aircraft, but it's newer, but it is not battery powered.
I was just wondering if your load masters are considered airmen.
I guess by the technical term, I'm considered an airman too. So anybody in the Air Force is considered an airman. Now that you have a soldier in the Army, your husband was in the Marines, what was he considered? I don't know, he wasn't a soldier, a Marine, a Marine.
Yeah.
We have the new Space Force that's been stood up, so they're all guardians. Yes,
The C-130s are all prop, right?
they are.
Prop. And is that, what's the reason for that versus jet?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the C-130 was designed in the 1950s. It was designed to get what's called STOL aircraft, short takeoff and landing. When I fly 757s for FedEx. When you put up those engines on a jet or even a fighter, it takes a little while for that turbine to spool up. Whenever you have a C-130 or a turbine aircraft, turboprop, even helicopter, that turbine engine is operating at 100% all the time. All I'm doing is changing the pitch on the blade on the C-130. So what that means is I have immediate lift going over that wing, so I can accelerate quickly and get out of there as fast as possible. That's the difference between a prop and an engine-driven aircraft.
So over here, Rusty. So the aircraft, as you mentioned, they're older. What's next? What, I mean, will they always be the C-130L coming up next, or what?
Yeah, so it's
How do we do that?
the funny thing is they were designed in the 50s, but they've been modified over the years. The 8 aircraft that we have in Peoria, they're made in 1995. So they're not that old. They don't have a whole lot of hours. But they have the C-130J that's coming out now, and then it becomes a political fight at that point. What is going to be the next aircraft? They say that with the new Army equipment that goes to war, it won't fit in the C-130. And it has to fit in the C-17. Problem is with the C-17, which is 500,000 pounds, opposed to a C-130 that can go out to 175,000 pounds. C-17 can't land on those dirt strips, rock strips that I was talking about. So it can't land and it can't turn around, and it's too heavy and it's too wet, it's going to tear up the runway and nobody else can use it. So that's the problem they're having. It's to support modernized Army equipment to get in the back of it. It's going to be big enough but not too big. So yes, there is. They're looking out to 2040 to replace it. Where acquisition programs work, I don't see that happening at all. So what they're looking at is a vertical lift capabilities, primarily what they want to do. Yeah. So the Osprey, if you're familiar with that, the CV-22, it's similar speeds to a C-130, but it can come down to a hover and drop into landing zone.
Someone I know has been involved the past 10 years in catering retirement dinners.
Yeah.
And I've always been amazed at how many retirements there have been every year. Do you find it, how many are retiring this year, and which is in 2 days, we're doing that. And then do you find it difficult to fill those positions?
That's a great question. And that is a DoD issue right now, is to retain first number. Okay, two things. Recruiting is a big piece of that, because when you look at the general population, only 25% of the people in the general population can actually serve. The people of the population is less than 1% of our population that actually do serve. The number one disqualifier is obesity. So we got to feed that problem. But then on the flip side, when people do their service, 6 years, they've done their commitment, or if they get to 20 or sometimes 35 years of service, it's time for them to get out. Well, when the job market is as it is right now, and there's a lot of good jobs, why wouldn't you take advantage of it and get out whenever you serve your time? It's fine. So it is a challenge. With regard to the retirement dinner, we haven't been able to do it for the last 3 years. So I'm going to be standing on the stage, handing out coins and smiling for 50 people to get across the stage. And that's only half the people that have retired in that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So our retention number, I think it's 48% right now of the people that are in that we can retain their retirement eligible. So it's a problem. It's not just us, it's everywhere else too. People just naturally want to move along and do other things, and they're taking advantage of it. I like this. I like this question.
Probably the last question here. Please. Thank you.
So I may not have been paying attention because I don't understand how many people are full-time and how many are reservists or come in part-time.
I bored you to sleep. That's what I got from that comment. Yeah, so roughly I have, we'll say 1,200 people that I have part-time authorizations. 1,200 people, 300 to 400 of those I have at any given time full-time on the base. Yeah. And now, as things have developed after 9/11, I have a lot more people in that in fluctuation. If they take more breaks after college from their civilian job, they'll come out and I'll have them on a more full-time capability or capacity, but not all the time. So yeah. So it's about 20% or so, maybe a little bit more than that. There you go. Thanks, guys.